You're either lying now or you're lying then when you signed up. You're either lying now as you tell us you don't support abortion because you signed a document notarized under penalty of perjury saying you do, or you're lying when you look us in the eye and try to claim to us that, oh, well, I'm a Democrat, but I don't support abortion. Welcome, everybody, to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider, your favorite candidate for Kentucky State Treasurer, your favorite podcaster, and dare I say, I'm going to say it, the wonderful, the one, the only Andrew Cooperrider, coming at you with another amazing episode. Great show for you guys today. We're going to be going over races, local. I say local, but not local per se. We're going to be going over some different races at different levels going on across the state. These are the races you're not hearing a lot of people talk about. I'm going to go over why they're important, why they're interesting to me, at least, so why they should interest you, and talk about what their outcome can mean and how you should read into what's going to happen with them. With that being stated, I welcome everybody. I'm going to stay here for the next 30 or 40 minutes or so. I don't know how long this one will be, and give you tons of information, great stuff to think about, to chew on. At least you could do for me is hit that like button, hit the comment, hit the share, and get the news out there. Let people know about me. Let people know I'm Andrew Cooper. I'm running for state treasurer. Let them know to get out and vote for me. That's in May now, same time as the governor elections. But of course, also, these are races, you know, you're going to be one talking about there around the kitchen table. These are the races you want to be talking about on Thanksgiving and what they mean and how important they are. And I'm going to be breaking that down. But one more thing before I get to that, please visit my campaign website at Andrew4ky.com. That is Andrew4ky.com. And you can also text the word Liberty to 33777. Text the word Liberty to 33777 to get text alert updates. And as always, if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, you can catch the audio only version, podcast version on Apple, Google, Spotify, and so on and so forth. So thank you guys for joining me. And let's dig into it. There's going to be a couple races we're going to look at today. And I got notes. That's how you know I'm taking it serious today, guys. I got notes. I got a lot of numbers on these notes. Don't look at my handwriting. Don't judge me. They all say geniuses have terrible handwriting. Well, I'm a genius. Let me tell you that. That is some bad handwriting. But we're going to be going over these races here. We're going to start with some local, kind of countywide, or maybe even smaller races going on across the state. And what do they mean? Why are they interesting? Why are they worth watching at all? So let's dig right down into it. Let's first start off. Let's go to Louisville first. Let's look at a mayoral race, and let's look at some school board races going on up there. The mayoral race is between Bill Durriff and Craig Greenberg. Guys, if you can remember there, Greg Fisher is the outgoing mayor, Democrat, of course, and known for being quite awful, quite terrible, really running that city into the ground. On top of that as well, we've seen, what are the issues in this race? You're going to see crime has become quite a big issue in this race. And Bill Durriff, he's the former mayor of J-Town. I'm sorry. J-Town. J-Town is the word for the town itself, but not its full name. I'm going to say it's Jeffersontown, and Jeffersontown, Kentucky. I blanked there for a second and was like, is it really J-Town? It is J-Town is Jeffersontown. I lived there once for like a few months in my younger years. So I don't know why I wouldn't remember it was Jeffersontown. But anyways, former mayor of J-Town, Bill Durriff, running against Craig there for the whole kit and caboodle. That's the mayor of Louisville. And let me tell you first, this is a expensive race. We've got Bill Durff having raised $603,000 as of his last filing, which would have been the 30-day pre. So as we're talking about these state races, we're talking about the 30-day pre races. So Bill Durff raised 603,000 and Craig's got $1.44 million in the bank, about $1.5 million that he has raised, not in the bank. Sorry, he spent some that he has raised, but we're also seeing some outside money coming in for both parties. So I think when all is said and done, you're probably going to see closer to 3 to 4 million spent in this race. And it sounds crazy because follow me here. Okay. So let's go into the breakdown as far as registration goes. So Republican versus Democrat, there's 633. Now this is all according to the voter files that is reported from the Secretary of State and as such. So according to the voter files here, the Republican, Democrat, and I'm sorry, everybody combined registered is 633,000 souls in Louisville. Of that, we've got 204,000 Republican, 360,000 of them are Democrat, or 32% versus 56%. Now, in the game of politics, we don't often just look at those raw numbers when we're considering voting. We're looking for people who show up to vote. And so we're going to talk about a different category as well today as I'm looking at these races. And those are our 2 out of 4 voters. These are individuals that have voted in 2 of the last 4 general elections or more. So maybe they vote out 3 of the last 4, 4 out of 4. We're going to look at the 2 out of the last 4. That's generally gives you a pretty good indication of kind of where you're starting to look at. It won't tell you how many people show up to vote. That's a different formula we typically use in the campaign game, but this will give us some idea of kind of what we're looking at. So at our 2 out of 4, so it was 3256. When we go to 2 out of 4, we have 306,000. Out of the 633,000 registered voters, only 306,000 have shown up to vote in the last 2, in at least 2 of the last 4 general elections. And so in that way, we have 101,000 Republican, 182,000 Democrat. That's 3359. Now, of course, the percentages have gotten farther apart, but the actual number of voters has shrunk. So that kind of gives you some more barrel down focus as far as you get into it. And so let's say we end up with something closer to, let's say we end up with 250,000 or so voters. If we end up spending in this race, as I predict, over $4 million, I think, from outside money, all in, will be spent on the Louisville race. And we have right around 250,000 people actually show up to vote. What we're going to end up with, that is $16 per voter, just to kind of give you some idea of what that's looking at. That's if 250,000 show up. I don't think it'll be that high either. But with that being stated, this is an interesting race. I mean, the talk of the town is that this may not fall. You would say in Louisville it's going to be a blowout. However, crime incredibly on the rise. Greg Fisher, the prior guy, is absolutely awful. And I know that Bill Durff campaign has done a good job and continues to do this job of connecting Greg and Craig. Unfortunately, their names rhyme for them, but essentially saying, hey, Craig Greenberg is just another continuation of Greg Fisher. And they've been making that kind of connection. And we'll see how this plays with the voters. Louisville may actually end up electing a Republican mayor. That's something to watch, right? If he comes close or wins, that is a major bellwether problem for Democrats across the nation, not just in Kentucky. See, the races we're looking at, I'm looking at them as bellwether races. They're going to tell us what are our opportunities for Republicans in these areas? What are the opportunities for conservatives in these areas? Or have they learned their lesson yet? Because all of us sane people would say these Democrats should have learned their lesson by now and should be voting Republican. But of course, that's not what we're seeing. And so what we're seeing here in the Bill Durff versus Craig Greenberg, you're going to be want to watch that on election day to see, one, if Bill can squeak it out. I think it will be a squeaker if he does win it. And then 2, also as well, if he loses, how much does he actually lose by? If it's a close one, if it's close at all in either direction, that tells you right there that Republicans are starting to make gains in some of these Democrat areas if we can continue to go down the path and I'm going to talk about at the end what I mean by continue. What do these election results? How should we look at it? What do they say? I think here, if you fall a little bit short, I think you would be mistaken to be a Republican and look at that and say we need to moderate. And I always think you're mistaken if you're a Republican looking at it saying we need to moderate, because people are running from the Democrat policies because of their results. Becoming Democrat light is not how we're going to maintain voters. If the Republicans just become like Democrats, it's not how we're going to maintain voters and continue to win into the future. So that's going to be an interesting race. Here's another local race worth watching, and I touched on it last week. That is the Bryson Dengussy Quinn versus Don Blevins here in Lexington for the county clerk race. Why is this interesting? So I got a heavier blue area. Once again, we're looking at registration in Lexington, 252,000 registered voters, 132,000 RD, and 88,000 are Republican. It's not as bad quite yet as Louisville. Remember, Louisville is 56% registered Democrat. Lexington's 52%. 32% Republican in Louisville. In Lexington, we're looking at 35%. So it's not as bad of a disparity, but it's still a large disparity. But what is interesting to me about this race? One, Bryson is a interesting and different kind of candidate. What I mean by that is she's clearly conservative. As far as that goes, all the conversations I have had with her showed she's a conservative, but the position of county clerk, the question you have is you've got Blevins, who has historically been very bad at the job. A lot of frustration. Last week, you saw me getting pretty upset about how he was treating people inside his office for donating against him. But this is what's interesting about this race. Okay. You Bryson, who's raised 37,000 as of her 30-day out. I believe she's continued to raise after that. I believe we're going to see Bryson maybe even getting into the 50s. Don Blevins, however, as of 30 days out, nothing. $0. In fact, he just started getting out yard signs. We've seen about 10 or 12 of those. Blevins has stated he doesn't need to run against her. She doesn't have a shot at all. But Blevins, I think we're going to see if Bryson can pull it out. It's part of it's going to be because Blevins hasn't worked at all. He hasn't done anything. He doesn't believe he needs to do anything to win this race. And we'll see if that blows up in his face. He's raised nothing. On top of that, you have a county clerk. He's never filed his KREF reports. Now, maybe he's really raised nothing and he believes he doesn't have to file those reports, but I could be mistaken. But as a candidate, I'm almost 1,000% positive that KREF, Kentucky election, the Kentucky election arm that looks at the finance that looks at the finance part of elections, right? It's called KREF. As far as that goes, it stands for the Kentucky Registry of Election Finance. They do. I'm almost 1,000% positive you have to file a report regardless if you've raised $1 or not. So you have a county clerk in charge of running elections. Remember, this is the same county clerk that called me up on a primary election day threatening to arrest me for doing something that was completely legal, that we had to get an emergency restraining order against, not filing a single one of his fundraising reports because he just doesn't think he has to. Maybe he's really not done anything, but I'm just saying $0 he's spent and raised and 0 reports he's filed. I'm pretty sure, Mr. Blevins, you should be filing it. And I'm pretty sure somebody who's in charge of making sure our elections are ran properly should know how to file election paperwork. But, what do I know? All right, moving on from those. We're going to return to Louisville. We're going to talk about the school district there because what we've seen is a conservative push. We've seen the Louisville GOP even slightly getting involved here with this parent choice, parent voice candidates. And what these are 4 candidates. They're not necessarily Republican as far as that go or conservative, but they are individuals who believe that the schools in Louisville are going in the wrong direction. Kids are being taught about things like questioning their gender instead of ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. That is quite clear. They're coming out there. They can't read. They can't write. They're being shot at every day, and something has got to change. And parent choice, parent voice has gotten out there. They've raised 4 candidates in the 4 races going on. Your candidates you're looking at there, Charlie Bell, And by the way, if you want to check these out, you can go to choice parentvoice.com, and you can check these out. And so you can kind of see where they're at, and then you can check out their websites. So you got Charlie Bell in her the first district. That is a woman, Charlie Bell. You've got in the third district Steve Olam. In the fifth district, you got Greg Passetti, and in the sixth district, you got Misty Glenn. What's interesting about the first district, so those of you who follow the school choice side of things, that is where our first, that is where a charter school was passed by our legislature, that a charter school needs to go into that area, and they will be opening up a charter school in that area. And what's interesting is Charlie Bell is actually a former principal superintendent. She ran a charter schools, I believe in Texas. So she has experience, a lot of experience running charter schools, knows how they work, knows how they operate. And if you're in that area, you gotta have to get that charter school in there anyways, whether you like it or not. And here's the thing, there's people out there who would allow children to suffer, their education to suffer, that wants the charter schools to fail because they don't want parents to have educational choice. And so they want it to fail. And by getting Charlie Bell in there, that will certainly give an honest chance for this charter school to succeed, as it's somebody who can actually advocate, understands what's going on with them, and will not be trying to make it fail, but instead trying to make it work. Because after all, shouldn't it be about delivering the best that we can for the kids? You would think it would be, but Democrats, they'd rather continue to allow kids to suffer to forward whatever messed up, crazy agenda they've got in mind there. So those are your 4 board races to watch in Louisville. The 4 candidates you're going to want to win: Charlie Bell, Greg Passetti, Missy Glenn, and Steve Olam. If you want parents to at all have some control or ability in their children's education as far as that goes. All right. Moving later on, we're going to go out west. We're going to go to Western Kentucky, to Henderson County, for their judge executive race. This is between the incumbent Brad Schneider and Dorsey Ridley is running against him. Now, Dorsey Ridley, a longtime state house rep and state senator, I think like in the 1980s and 90s and into the 2000s, he was a house rep and state senator. And now he's running for judge executive against Brad. Brad first won, I believe, in, I think, 2018. I believe he first won in 2018. So he is in the incumbent. Now, this is what's interesting about this race. This is a bellwether race for a few reasons, okay? One, this is still, even though Brad, the incumbent, is the Republican, this is still a quote-unquote bellwether county of sorts. So there's this weird thing you got to watch for in Kentucky, rural Kentucky, and that is this blue dog Democrats. So these are people who are registered Democrats because their family has been Democrats for their entire lives, but they do not vote Democrat. They are conservatives through and through. They just believe in this idea that, hey, I got to be Democrat to vote in the primaries. And this is a message too. That is anybody who works out in Eastern and Western Kentucky, rural areas, in politics, like I find myself doing all the time, what you're going to discover is that number one reason you will have Democrats that are diehard Republicans, still registered Ds, is because growing up, you had to be a D if you want to vote in the primaries, because that's where the primaries were. Republicans didn't have primaries. And the Republican Party, and not the Republican Party, but the Republican quote unquote establishment, let's call spade spade. They hold on to their power a lot of ways because they're not challenged, because it's team, red shirt versus team blue shirt, and they don't have to stand per se on their policies because, of course, you always have a worse option than them on the other side. However, during the primaries is when you have two potentially good options, or one good option, one bad option. And that bad option could be somebody you'd pick if they're up against a Democrat. And so typically we see the quote unquote establishment Republicans not wanting to see primaries because it challenges their authority. However, word to the wise, that is the number one way we're going to grow the Republican Party, is by having primaries out in Eastern and Western Kentucky, in these rural areas where you've had blue dog Democrats. They will start to flip Republican more and more, as one, they have friends who are running in the primaries they want to vote for, and two, as the side of Republicans can offer them a primary for them to vote in, so they're not only voting one time. That's just kind of the casual thing, because this is what's interesting. Despite this being a very conservative area as far as their representation go, Brad, Republican. The state house rep for that, or the state senator for that area, Robbie Mills, Republican. The state house rep for Henderson County, house rep for Henderson County is, I'm going to tell you who it is. No, sorry. I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. I'm sorry. Jonathan Dixon. There you go. So it's Dixon, who is a Republican. So, there you go. Their representation, their judge executive, their state house rep, their state senator, Republican. But yet, when you look at the registration in Henderson County, what do you see? You see Republicans with only 33% of the registered voters. So out of 36,000 on the nose registered voters, 12,158 of them are Republican, 20,740 of them are Democrat. As far as active voters, you got 16,885, 5,691 of them are Republicans, 33%. And then out of Democrat, 10,411 or 61%. And really you'll see those totals across the board. And so, but what you see is but yet Republicans are winning in that area constantly. And like I said, the large chunk that is, these are blue dog Democrats voting Republican. But what this means is they could vote Democrat, which has led this to be the most expensive judge executive race in the state right now. I don't know about historically, but in the state right now, Brad Schneider, he has raised $76,000, and Dorsey Ridley, $80,981. They, I've told, are actually going to be running TV ads in a judge executive race. That is crazy. That is crazy to talk about. TV ads in a judge executive race. That is crazy to think about. And for those of you who don't understand why this is crazy, a judge executive race, and you can go on KREF and take a look. KREF, just Google KREF KY, and you can search all the election finance statements for all the people you want. What you're going to see is most judge executive races, maybe 30,000 a candidate on the high side if they're competitive. It is insane that we're seeing 80K each. This is still 30 days out. They're going to continue to raise money as things are put on it. By the time things are said and done, you're going to see maybe 100,000 each being spent on this race, 100,000 each maybe. And the reason why is because this is a bellwether race. This is where the Democrats think, can we win rural Kentucky back? Because what has happened is they've continued to lose seats in the state house. They've lost seats time and time again. They're going to be close to 80, maybe 85-ish or so seats Republican in the state house. Guys, we just took over that house in 2017. So in 2016 elections, we just went over 50 state house reps being Republican. And since that time, so since 2017, just 5-6 years ago, it has become now a super duper duper uber majorities with over 80 or almost 80 ending up going to be Republicans in the state house, because they've lost in the rural areas, have become more and more conservative, and they're trying to win them back. And they believe Dorsey Ridley is going to be the guy to do it in this little judge executive race, not little, but in this judge executive race in Henderson County. He's a longtime Democrat. He's a well-known Democrat. Like I said, he's a state senator, state house. Now he's running for judge executive, which some people view as, I don't view it as a step down, but some people do. They're just different levels of government. It is different, though. You don't typically see a state senator running as a judge executive. Happens all the time, though. Normally, it actually goes the other way. But anyways, point is that Dorsey's been pulling in the money, and he is running in this. And I think the Democrats really look at this as kind of their last hurrah of sorts for them to look at there. Judges races. Okay, so that judge executive race, watch that in Henderson County. If Brad pulls it out and stomps them, that shows us that we're going to continue to see more conservative switch on our eastern and western Kentucky. If Brad loses to Dorsey, That is going to signal to the Democrat Party to push hard. They have a chance in our rural areas. They could somehow find some message. And of course, Dorsey's running as far as he can away from Biden, away from the national politics side of things. And I never understood that. I never understood these Democrats, especially here in Kentucky, being like, well, I'm a pro-life Democrat. How is that possible? I mean, when you sign up to run for office, you have to sign a paper saying you're a member of X party and you support their principles and their platform. Their principles and their platform. You're signing an official document, notarized under penalty of perjury, that you plan to support their principles and platform. And the Democrat platform on abortion is... In the Democrat platform, it states Democrats are committed to protecting and advancing reproductive rights and justice. We believe unequivocally, the majority of Americans, that every woman should be able to access high-quality reproductive health care services, including safe and legal abortions. It is in the Democrat Party platform that they support abortions. There is no such thing. If you are running for office as a Democrat, you cannot state that you do not support abortion. You can't say that because you've signed a document. When you run for office, you sign a document under penalty of perjury with a notary saying you will support that party's platform. And a part of their platform, their principles, is abortion on demand, safe, legal, and available. Not rare, available. And you're going to stand there as a Democrat now and suddenly say, well, I'm against abortion. Why? Because you're in Kentucky and abortion isn't popular? You're not a Democrat, then leave the party. You're lying when you sign your paperwork to run. You're either lying now or you're lying then when you signed up. You're either lying now as you tell us you don't support abortion because you signed a document notarized under penalty of perjury saying you do, or you're lying when you look us in the eye and try to claim to us that, oh, well, I'm a Democrat, but I don't support abortion as a candidate in Kentucky. You're a liar. You're lying and you're wrong. It's impossible. It's impossible. You've either committed perjury or you're a liar. And I'm inclined to believe that they're lying. I'm inclined to believe they are, because who would want to be associated with that stuff, with that garbage? And they're going to try to continue to push that. And they're pushing that here in Eastern Western Kentucky. These Democrats, I'm not a pro-abortion Democrat. I'm a pro-life Democrat. Doesn't exist. You're lying. You're lying. So they're going to try to push this in the Brad Dorsey race. We'll see what ends up happening. We'll see the blue dog Democrats, these old school Democrats that try to claim they're not something that they are, because at the heart of it, every Democrat is this. Every Democrat politician is that. They can't help themselves. They have to. This is who they are. They are, by definition, the same exact people as Joe Biden. Joe Biden's been in office forever. He is through and through exactly the kind of Democrat all of them have been, and look where he ended up. Without fail, Democrats end up there. Without fail. So that's a race to watch. Brad Dorsey. Okay. There's 3 judge races that I believe are worth watching. That's the Fisher v. Keller race for the Supreme Court. It's the Bob Winter v. Susan Citrullo. I haven't actually heard the name before said out loud. I've seen it plenty of times. Citrullo for the appeals court in Northern Kentucky. And then you're also going to have Hunter Darty v. John Reynolds in Jessamine County. Joe Fisher, Bob Winter, and John Reynolds are all conservative. This is where it gets interesting. Recently, there was a court ruling that stated that judge candidates could identify who they are, who their party is, Republican, conservative, things like that. Because it has always been a historic rule for judges' races, has always been, you can't say that you're with the party because it's nonpartisan. You can't talk about how you'll rule on cases because that could show prejudice, and you can't talk about those issues. So what were you supposed to run on as a judge? We don't know what party you are. We don't know how you stand on the issues because you can't tell us. The only way we would know is if you asked a lawyer that was your friend how they felt about a judge. And who knows, maybe that judge gave them a bad ruling, so they think they're awful. That's not the best way to look at it. There's no real straightforward way to judge judges because their records aren't available. See, with legislators, you can see how they vote on things. City council, school board, state house reps, you see how they vote on things. Judges can't see. It's very difficult for the common man, for common woman, to be able to look to see how judges ruled and what cases they've been on. How do you do your research? How do you do your research for a judge's race? About the only thing you have is, are they conservative? Are they not? At least there you know what they stand for. And so you've seen Fisher, Winter, and Reynolds coming out saying, we're conservatives. We're Republicans. And of course, the Democrats on the other side have thrown a fit because they're like, oh, that's unfair. Why? Because you're Democrats. Because if it becomes partisan, people will vote you out because they'll see you for who you are and what you stand for and what values you have. So those are interesting races to watch because it's going to be interesting to see how well their message of I'm the conservative option in this judge's race gets out when they don't have a party signifier on the ballot next to their name. Keep in mind, it's nonpartisan on the ballot. And so does that message get out there? Do people understand where that is? So that is interesting. Okay, now moving on to House races. There are 3 House races worth watching. First, we're going to go up to Louisville again. House race. This is for District 37. This is Emily Callaway versus Jeffrey Donahue. Donahue has been in since 2012. Why is this race interesting? Here you go. Here's why this race is interesting. Last year, 2020, Donahue won 54% to 45% against his Republican challenger. However, there's been redistricting. Let's look at the numbers. In the old district, out of the 28,727 registered voters, 9,739 of them Republican, 15,722 of them Democrat. That's 33% to 54%. That's a 21-point difference. Now it is 13,058 registered Republicans to 16,130 registered Democrats, or 32,000 out of 30. So out of 32,903 registered individuals, 13,000 Republicans, 16,000 Democrat, or 39 and 49%. So before it was 21 percentage points difference. Now it's 10 percentage points difference. And how much did Donahue beat his Republican challenger by last time? 10 points. But now, because of redistricting, we've seen a 10-point flip in registration. And this is reflected in the fundraising too as well. Callaway, fundraise, state house race, general election, 56,724. Donahue, 57,815. Emily Callaway's got a shot. She's got a shot at taking this one. Donahue's been trying to put forward some pretty conservative legislation to cover his butt for filed bills for this next session. Pre-filed bills for this next session. Interesting, considering you're in such a dead heat race. But we've got, remember guys, registration before 21-point difference, now 10-point difference. And what was the percentage of race before? 54-45, 10 percentage points apart. And we've shrunk the gap of registration. You need, as we've seen out in Western Kentucky, and as you see all the time, Republicans do outshine their percentage of the registered votes all the time because Republicans show up to vote at a higher rating than Democrats do. Long story, maybe that's for a different episode. So that's House District 37. These are some of the House races we're seeing that have been redistricted to become more favorable, where a Republican could win. And Emily Callaway could win that. The numbers are in her favor. The fundraising's there. It's there. She could pull it out over Donahue, and we could see that seat flip from Democrat to Republican. Let's see if she can pull that one off. That is a race to watch right there. Here's another House race. This one's interesting. It's Gearing versus Rachel Roberts. Sorry, I know I paused there. I don't know why. I know Gearing very well. So Gearing versus Rachel Roberts. This is House District 67. This is in Northern Kentucky. So this is another one which has, they've set it up. They've made it a closer election. So normally you'd see this being a battleground election, but you're not quite getting that same thing. Let's first go to the numbers before I talk about what's going on in this race. So in the last election, Rachel Roberts in the general 2020 won 52-46. So that's a 6 percentage point difference. Okay. In normal circumstances, she'd be in trouble because it's red wave year. It's a red wave year. And Rand Paul's on the ballot and he drives out people too as well. But and Democrats are not going to come out as much. Joe Biden's not inspiring. Democrats aren't going to come out. All politics are local. National politics affecting your local politics. Here's where it is. It's a red wave year. Normally, she would be in trouble. And they've also redistricted. Let's take a look at the tail of the tape, tail of the numbers, okay? Old registration. 34,000 registered, 12,000, basically about 13,000 Republican and 15,500 Democrat. A 37% to 45% difference, 8 percentage points difference. What we see in the new district is 14,777 Republicans versus 16,910 Democrats out of 37,880 registered voters. That is now a difference of only 5 percentage points. So we see a 3 percentage point close in the gap in registration coming into this race. Keep in mind, she only won by 6 points last time, and it's a red wave year. This should be a nail biter. This should be a close race. This should be one where Republicans are getting invested, but they're not. They're not. Rachel Roberts in this race has raised $124,000. Gearing, $8,486. Why? Because the Republican establishment doesn't like Gearing very much. They don't like him very much at all. They believe Gearing is quote unquote too extreme. He's too much of a Trumper. He doesn't get along well enough with the establishment, yada, 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 whatever you want to call it. And just remember this too. Whenever you hear Republicans talk about, we got to get out there, we got to support all Republicans, everybody draws a line somewhere, right? We've seen nationally Mitch McConnell drawing the line. We see statewide, they're drawing the line. What they're saying at the establishment is we don't want to support Gearing in this election because we don't really like him that much. So, they're not going to tell you to go out and vote for Rachel Roberts. Some Republicans are, I'm told, but they're also not getting out there and supporting Gearing, something you would expect them to do. However, Gearing may still pull it off. I know it seems like he won it. You're saying, Andrew, he's only raised 8,000 versus 124,000. But things have gotten tighter on the registration. And also as well, it'll be a test to see. This is be a good test, okay? Even if he performs better than last year, considering the money disparity and everything else, even if he doesn't win, but he performs very well. There's an argument that says these so-called, what some people would call extreme candidates, and like I said, you've heard this at the national level, are not good candidates in the general. We need to moderate. You need moderate candidates in the general. But moderate candidates are inspiring. Look at Trump. Win the presidential election against Hillary Clinton. He wasn't very moderate. She tried to run as a moderate. What we see is that the races going on in some of these areas, if you have a good candidate that is inspiring and knows how to present themselves and knows how to campaign, and Jerry's getting out there and he's working, Gearing's getting out there and he's working, these ideas of saying, well, that candidate's too extreme, you're missing the point that he does inspire people to show out to vote. Like I said, that's what Trump did. And so it'll be a good test to see how does that actually look, because he's got basically no money compared to Roberts, but it is more Republican friendly. And does he drive out more voters, or at least drive people to vote for him? I don't know. We'll see how it turns out. Maybe the establishment's right. Maybe they're wrong. But also on the same weather bell, as far as extreme versus not extreme, what's that mean electorally? We moved to Dan Pfister, House District 56. First year, so that he got through his first session. He's going into this one. I am seeing the Republican House Caucus spend some money for Dan, and I'm seeing the Democrat House Caucus spend some money against Dan for his opponent. That's interesting to me. It's interesting to me because Dan is a very non-offensive representative. He is not extreme. Well, of course, the Democrats, everybody's extreme. You're extreme. That piece of wood over there, because there's an R next to it, would be too extreme for a Democrat. It doesn't believe in chopping the genitalia off children. So it's too extreme for a Democrat. But Dan Fisher, he's very moderate, very middle of the road. But we're seeing some money spin. Is he in trouble? Does he underperform in a red wave year? If he does, I still think he wins no matter what. But if he does underperform in a red wave year, what that tells you doesn't say anything. Dan's a good guy. Dan's not offensive. But what it tells you is that this whole idea of extreme, not extreme, whatever, far right Republicans, whatever that means, Trumpian Republicans, liberty Republicans, that because you got to understand the general, the mainstream, the moderate, the Liz Cheney-esque, Romney-esque type people, Mitt Romney-esque type people say, well, these far over there, they can't win in the general and they're too extreme and blah, blah, blah. Once again, I point to Trump, but anyways, they're too extreme. They can't win the general. We need more moderate people. Dan Fisher's very non-offensive. I don't know if he described himself as a moderate, but I don't know if I'd call him super moderate, but he's definitely, would nobody under any reasonable terms would call him extreme at all. He's a good conservative. But if he underperforms or if he struggles, that flies in the face of this idea that you need to, oh, well, we've got to water down our message in order to win elections. We have to water down the conservative principles and standpoints. I don't think we do. Finally, this one's just funny. Jeff Young versus Andy Barr. Jeff Young absolutely disdained by the Democrat establishment. In fact, what's his name? Bashir was asked if he was going to support Jeff Young, and Bashir responded that Jeff Young needs help, but this race ain't it, implying he's got a mental illness. The first time I met Jeff Young, he walked up to me and he said something about how Andy Barr is going to put us all homeless on the streets and we're going to be dying and craving for food because Andy Barr is destroying us, something like that. Look, you don't have to like Andy Barr, and sometimes there's decisions he makes that anybody can disagree with. But Andy Barr is not powerful enough or making the kinds of decisions that end up with me homeless in the street. First off, he's not a Democrat. Those are Democrats doing that. And second off, he's a congressman. He's one of over 400 votes. He's one of 435 House reps. And so he alone is not going to put me in the streets. But he walked up, he said something very crazy to me. He's getting no support from the Democrat Party, Democrat establishment, anything at all. It's just going to be curious to me to see how many people walk into the voting booth and vote for Jeff Young. Does he underperform or overperform or perform exactly at what he's expected to? If he underperforms and Andy Barr overperforms, or maybe just a lot of people don't vote in that race, that tells you there is a way to be too, I guess, crazy of a candidate for the Democrats, as you may say. But I don't know. I've got a feeling a lot of Democrats are still going to vote for Jeff Young. And, Jeff Young, it's the first time he's ever gotten a major party nomination. This guy has ran for every office that's come across his plate. He just keeps running for office. The guy loves running for office. He's ran probably 10 times for office, I believe. So, there you go. So to recap it here, interesting races to watch. Okay. The Bryston Blevins race, Bill Dourif, county clerk race in Fayette County, Bill Dourif versus Craig Greenberg race in Louisville, the 4 school board races in Louisville, the Henderson County Judge Executive race, very expensive race, bellwether race for Kentucky for the future of the Democrat Party. That's between Brad Schneider and Dorsey Ridley. And then, these judges races, Fisher v. Keller, Bob Winter v. Citrullo, and John Reynolds v. Doherty. Those are the conservative judges going up against these more liberal judges and seeing if the party, quote unquote, politics comes out to play. In the House, you're going to watch House District 37 race, Trout, Callaway, and Donahue to see if that gets flipped Republican. The numbers say it should. Let's see what happens. You're going to watch the House 67 race, first Gearing versus Roberts. This should have been an easy flip, but we're seeing the Republican party leadership as a whole. I don't say the party leadership itself, but the state house leadership not getting behind Jerry at all. We'll see what happens, him versus Rachel Roberts. And then, of course, watch the Dan Pfister race, see if he underperforms, overperforms. He's a non-offensive candidate, but the Democrats are running, I believe, the ex-mayor of Versailles against him. And if he underperforms, what does that mean? Well, it means you can't just, being a quote unquote, this idea that, well, if we're just all moderate Republicans, we're going to win elections more. That won't really show through. Once again, I'm not saying Dan Pfister is necessarily a moderate. I'm just saying he's a non-offensive Republican. He's a good guy. He's a nice guy. He cares about the people. He's very middle of the road. He's very, I would say, more moderate. But he's got his principles. He's got his conservative principles. He cares about the things that are important to care about. He cares about, he's pro-life, and he's worried about, of course, the issues as far as teaching and gender theory and all these other things. He cares about those things, but he's also a very nice, straightforward guy. I guess I wouldn't call him robust. He's very non-offensive. Does a non-offensive Republican underperform because Democrats are pumping in tons of money, and what happens? What happens if red wave year there? That's interesting to watch. And of course, just interesting to see if Jeff Young gets less votes than Democrats have historically. Now, of course, that district's been redistricted, so it will go up a bit in but just see how much he underperforms. Well, guys, that's all I have time for you today. Went a little bit longer covering these important races, things to watch in November. I hope you'll join me next time. I hope you'll visit andrewforgive.com. I hope you'll share this with others, get the word out there. Thank you so much, and have a great day.